Good day, everyone, and welcome to SmartBear's webinar on transparency through peer review in the SDLC. My name is Mel Gage, and I'm a solutions engineer here at SmartBear focused on the Collaborator solution.
And Mel, I'm actually going to stop you. Just want to make sure that everybody on the line can hear us. So if you don't mind, you can put a little note there in the chat that says you can hear us. That'd be helpful. Hey, perfect. Excellent. Thanks, everybody. Go for it, Mel.
All right, and joining me today is Justin Collier, who is the product owner for the Collaborator suite.
Yeah, welcome everybody. Looking forward to talking a little bit about transparency in the peer review.
So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Today's session is being recorded, and that recording will be made available at the conclusion of this session at a later date. Please post your questions to the Q&A. Justin is monitoring the Q&A for us today, and any questions posted in the general chat may get missed, so please use the Q&A. And at the end of our presentation today, with time permitting, we will have a Q&A session.
And Mel, if I see anything that's real pertinent to what you're talking about, I may just interject and have you do it on the fly.
Please do. That would be greatly appreciated. Making this as interactive as possible certainly helps me out. All right, so today we're going to start basically with SmartBear's portfolio. Since we are talking about transparency in the SDLC, SmartBear offers a huge portfolio of wide-ranging products to meet your development challenges. Today we're going to be focused on Collaborator, but it's fitting to bring up our additional solutions with the theme of today's presentation. When we look at the software development lifecycle from the older style waterfall development to the newer agile and scrum-based development processes, it's often that teams are very focused on their deadlines and a bit isolated from what other teams in the product suite may be working on as well. So we're looking at Collaborator that has been placed in the create category here, but can be easily implemented in every phase of your workflow, from reviewing design and requirements documents at the very earliest stages of your development process, through multiple cycles of peer code review at every stage, to final reviews and sign-offs on supporting documentation as projects come to the conclusion for release. Our agenda today, we're going to talk about the importance of transparency in the SDLC. We're going to talk a little bit about shifting left and how discovering defects in your process at the earliest stages can greatly reduce costs of products in release. We're going to talk about the importance of peer review. We're going to tie it all together briefly and then go through a demonstration of the Collaborator suite and show you how some of your processes can be brought together in a single location for review and comment through teams, whether they're local or geographically dispersed. And then finally, Q&A. So the importance of transparency. On the nature of transparency and why it's important in peer review, as I mentioned earlier, in today's fast-paced world of development, there are often times that teams are isolated in their own silos. They're working on their projects, they're extremely focused, and Team A may not know what Team B is doing, even though they're working on the same projects. So this is where transparency comes into play, because without transparency, it becomes harder to deal with unexpected tasks, whether those tasks are new defects coming in from the field or from customer reports, or even from new requirements and different directions in the development processes coming down from product and program managers.
Yeah, I know for us, Mel, just on the collab team, I'd say the transparency piece of this, it goes beyond just the software developers and the, the QA team and documentation. Those folks are working together kind of constantly every day. But then for us, we bring in a lot of the stuff as it relates to the SEs, right? I mean, that's your role. So keeping you up to speed on what's going on, obviously our support organization, sales, et cetera. So it's not just about maybe the SDLC, but it kind of ties back to the entire business.
Yeah, that's correct.
To kind of share that knowledge across the organization.
Right, because as an SC myself, we're often involved with those customer reports and trying to come to resolution and having those conversations with the development team to make sure those needs are being met and communicating the progress on those types of items back to the customers. So how can we improve transparency in our process, and how can we ensure quality in our products with the type of rapid sprints that we see in today's SDLC? Is it a possibility that you're skipping and passing on review processes that could be affecting your release code? So we're here today to talk about how you can add that review into your process and make it an integral part of maintaining quality in your code today. So I talked a little bit earlier about shifting left. That brings us to our next topic. The idea of shifting left has to do with sliding the point where your testing catches defects. So when we look at the basic slide, the basic graph here, we'll see that the majority of our defects are actually introduced in the coding phase. Yet in traditional workflows, it isn't until we get to unit test, functional test, system test, and sometimes even beyond and into release where defects are actually discovered. So we can see here that in system tests is where we see a large percentage of catching these possible defects. So the idea behind shifting left is we want to reduce those costs. If we're catching defects earlier in the process, we can bring those huge costs back down to a much more manageable level by identifying defects in the coding phase. And this is where peer review comes in, and Collaborator is a huge part of maintaining code quality through peer review. So as we shift our coding, our reviews to the left, we start to see that the defects found begin to slide to the left as well, out of system test, out of functional test, and more towards the coding realm. And as that happens, we'll see that the percentage of defects found begins to decrease because they're beginning to be captured at the coding phase, and maybe even a little earlier when we start to talk about reviews and requirements documents to make sure that the program is moving as it's intended. We can catch those defects earlier and greatly bring down the cost of development and keeping those defects from reaching the field where it can even affect our product reputation. So we'll talk about the importance of the peer review. So the importance of catching defects early in the process is huge. We want to have the shift left. It's a big part of transparency in your process. And you want to introduce review as early as possible for your code, and possibly, as I mentioned earlier, for your requirements and your specifications documents. And we do have a quick poll question that I will send out about are you a current user of Collaborator? Go ahead and send that poll question out, and we'll see. Give that a few minutes while I talk about what we're looking at on the importance of peer review. So peer review is necessary for code review and code quality. Having that review stage is the best way to bring down those costs. But rather than making review a face-to-face or a laborious process using emails or webinars or phone meetings, what if you had a tool which centralized these reviews? It's going to facilitate the visibility of your review process, and Collaborator brings all that to the table.
I think, Mel, it's interesting, and I'll let you, wrap up your poll or whatever, but, as I think about the peer review process, obviously for Collaborator, we use it internally, and it's a huge part of what we're doing from a code review perspective, but we do a whole lot of other things other than just code review within the context of Collaborator. And I think you're going to kind of talk about some of that stuff today, and I'll probably jump in and add some of the things that we're doing on the Collab team that maybe might be unique or things that people hadn't really thought of. But as you indicated, I mean, you can bring in requirements documents, you can bring in test cases, test plans. I've had people within our marketing organization use Collaborator to do reviews and as well. So, I mean, you can really use Collaborator in a lot of different facets as it relates to your product development process.
Certainly, and getting eyes on those requirements, make sure that every team within the process understands what the end goal is. And again, it adds that transparency. So the left hand knows what the right hand's doing and what the expectations are, and that those are properly set. So using Collaborator to even begin your process before the first line of code is even written helps to ensure your success. All right, thank you for the poll. It looks like we're at about a 60-40 split with 40% using Collaborator and about 60% not. Thank you for your input on that. All right, so with that, we are going to tie it all together. So this is how Collaborator can become your review data hub. So with Collaborator, we are tying intimately into your code repositories. So you can create reviews, and we're going to go through a demonstration that shows how this works. You can use Collaborator to kick off external jobs. In this case, I'm running a Jenkins job that will be handling some of my external inputs, but Collaborator also incorporates their own triggers so that you could use Collaborator to kick off some of these events as well. And that ranges from static test results to external ticketing, external build tools, however you want to incorporate this into your process for your workflow as it applies to your organization.
We don't have a poll for this, but I am curious how many people are pulling in static analysis results into Collaborator. And feel free just to add a comment there in the question and answers thing if that's something that you're doing or something that maybe you're not doing today but would be interested in doing. I've been having some conversations with customers that are looking at us supporting something that's called Serif, which is a static analysis results interchange format. So I'm just kind of curious what people are doing, if anything, if that's something of interest. And again, feel free to put a note there in the question and answer if that's something that rings a bell or strikes a chord for you.
All right, well, we do have actually one polling question that centers around review automation, and I'll launch this out. Approximately how much of your review process is automated, if any? We'd be interested to hear that.
And when you say automated review process, what do you have in mind here, Mel, as far as what parts of that might be automated? Obviously, the peer review piece isn't. I mean, that takes somebody to come in and perform the review, but what else would you be looking for there?
So in the nature of transparency, what we're doing or what we're going to demonstrate here in just a moment is bringing those automated pieces. So in my case, in my demonstration today, we're going to take a piece of code, we're going to attempt to compile, we're going to do a static linting on it, and generate output reports from those two actions and bring them automatically into Collaborator. So when I talk about automatic testing, it's more of what are you doing to verify your code as it moves through the process.
Got it. Cool. And we've got somebody who's chimed in here, says that they're using Coverity as part of their process, but they're not actually pulling results into Collaborator today. I don't know if that's something of interest or not for you, but just kind of curious.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and end our poll here. It looks like we have the majority of people responding. All right. So I'll go ahead and share those results. And we can see that the majority of folks aren't using any type of automation in their review process at all, with about 30% of folks giving their hand at it to see how it works. Well, I hope we can ignite your curiosity today when I go through some of what I'm about to demonstrate, and make Collaborator a part of that. So today, for our demonstration, this is a basic flowchart of what I put together for my automation. Starting on the left-hand side, we're just going to take a basic Java file. This one is actually for creating a series of Fibonacci numbers. It's just a very simple Java file. I've got it located in a Git repo, and I have some hooks set up so that when I actually make a change to my file and use git bash to commit that file, it sets off that hook, which then begins a Jenkins job. And that Jenkins job is going to do a couple of things. It's going to take that file, run it through my Java compiler to ensure that it compiles, or if it doesn't, create an output report that will let me know what failed. And I'm also going to run it through a static linting tool. In this case, I'm using one called PMD. It's one I found that is an open source tool and can run on Windows as well as Linux-based machines. So that's what I grabbed for my demonstration. It also outputs a results file. The Jenkins job will then, using the Collaborator command line interface, log into my server, create a review for the main.java file, and then append the output files from my compile attempt and my static analysis into Collaborator and create a review. So with that, I am going to get started on our process today. So I'm going to begin with just my basic main Java file here. And I'll just make a simple code change. And if you have any questions about what I'm doing at any time, please feel free to shoot those into the Q&A. I'm just going to make a simple code change and resave my file. I'm going to bring up a couple more windows here so we can see what process I'm going through. And so I'm basically in my Git repository here that I have set up just to show you where I'm setting up my automation. Within Git, there are a series of hooks. So I've come in here basically with a post commit hook that once I set off a commit, it reaches out to my Jenkins job and begins my Jenkins job on my Jenkins server. So now that I've already made my changes to my main Java file, I'm going to run my git bash, and we're going to make those commits. So first I'll do a git add to queue the file, and I'm going to do a git commit for this particular change. So what we're going to see happen here the minute I hit enter, and let me refresh my Jenkins server here. The minute I hit enter, it's just going to kick off that post commit hook, which will begin a new Jenkins job for this particular project, Get Jenkins. And this is something that I threw together in about a day's worth of work. So developing this type of process with Collaborator is very simple. So we run my commit, and what we'll see over here is the new job that is now pending. And once that starts, I'll show you what it's working through. So we can actually look at what Jenkins is doing as it runs through its process. So as I mentioned before, I'm running it through a compiler, I'm running it through my linter, I'm creating a review, and then I'm attaching all of the output files from those actions to my review. So we'll see my Jenkins job has completed with success. And if I now move to my Collaborator server, Log in. We'll now see that I have a new review, number 158, for my main.java. So as the author of this review, so I've done a few things with the command line interface. And if I bring up my batch file, I can show you what this looks like. So, and I don't recommend this if you're developing files. I've actually got my password and username in clear case here. That will be changing, even though this is a private server. Just know that it does. This step can be done in other places that keep that obfuscated so you cannot see it. So, so what I've done is I've run my command line to create a new review with me as the creator and the title using my default template. So Collaborator.
Mention right here, Mel, I think what's interesting as you're doing this process, you can assign people to reviews as well, right? So, and you can do that in a number of different ways. I mean, if obviously you could do it from the command line, which may or may not make sense in this particular example that you're using, but you've also got the capability to have review subscriptions, right? Correct,
and I was just about to touch on that, Justin. So that is a great feature of Collaborator. So in this particular review, we'll see that I'm assigned to a basic group. As I mentioned, I've assigned my default template, and you'll notice that I'm already assigned as the author because I created the review, and I've actually, through that review subscription, have assigned my reviewer automatically. So in this particular instance, I don't need to do any further setup within Collaborator to go ahead and send this review to the inspection phase. I could have even automated that step as well, and once my review subscription assigned the reviewers and met the criteria for this template, I could have had the command line push this review directly to inspection. My reviewers would have been notified via email, and the review process could have started seamlessly simply by doing one commit within Git. We'll see that we've also attached our main Java file as well as the outputs from my two analysis tools. Now this kind of goes against standard workflows. As the author, I could come in here and look at these and see what failed and what didn't, but in the nature of peer review, I'm going to go ahead and push this review to inspection. So now my reviewer has been notified via email. He can open that review simply by clicking the link on the email and going directly into work on the peer review. So I'm going to switch to my review account. And I'm going to refresh my screen. And we'll see that I have now received this particular review to begin work. So moving into the inspection phase, I am now the reviewer. I will go take a look at the code and see and look at my output files as well that have been attached and see what changes might need to be made. And if there are any issues, we'll attach some defects and show you what that looks like. We'll also talk a little bit about external applications. And as I showed in my original slide, with Collaborator in the center as the center of your workflow, we can tie to those external ticketing applications like Jira. And we have an intimate integration with Jira. So getting to the meat of my review, I can look at my quick overview and see that I have one line of code change. And I can look at these two files. We'll start with my main code. And I'll see that indeed I do have the one change in there. But before we even get started on that, let's see how my compile output works. So I'll get this file that shows, oh, I actually had two errors in my Java file. So I know from the start that I've got some bugs that I need to take a look at. And we can see what those errors are. And we can even go back into our code and make some comments. And I will show you how to add defects once we get to that point. Let's take a look at our static analysis and see how that looks. We also had some issues with basic Java coding convention, from unused imports to static to improper methods, and some improper use of declarations for variables. So here we have some, right off the bat, some really good tools to see where we might have some issues in our code. And as much as automation and these tools help us, they're still not the complete answer to peer review. Getting eyes on code is still by far one of the best ways to reduce defects in your code. So judging from those, we can come in, make some overall comments. We'll just put in an overall comment associated with this particular file. It basically just says our compile failed. And we can add that as a defect. And it's a build defect. And these defect fields are completely customizable as well. So whatever your workflow needs, you can customize your defect fields based on your particular workflows.
Now, I think what's important for some of those folks that may not use Collaborator today, here is Mel's showing, I think, the ability to go in and add comments, obviously, but one of the things that really helps organizations when they're using Collaborator is this ability to file a defect, and this term defect, you can change that term within the context of Collaborator, call it anything you want, a finding, a bug, whatever. But the idea is it's something within the context of the review that you want to have fixed or addressed before that review can move to the closed or completed phase, right? So it's just a way to ensure that nothing gets overlooked or skipped. Once it's filed, here's a defect, then you can make sure it gets addressed. And what's nice about that is you can also set it up so only the person that created the defect has the ability to mark it as being fixed, or anyone who's maybe a reviewer could do that. So there's any number of different ways that you can configure the tool to help ensure that the appropriate items are addressed before that review is completed.
Right, and in some workflows, in some instances with our integration with repositories such as GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, you can even go in and prevent merges from happening if the Collaborator review has not been signed off. So Collaborator adds that great QA gating effect of making sure your code is only getting merged if reviews have been done and it's good code. So back from our other file, we had some other defects, and it's because our variable names here don't match. So we can simply click on a line to begin a conversation at this particular line of code. So missing the R, and we can add that as a defect as well. Again, it's a, we'll just call it a build defect as well. And so here's where we also have the ability to, if we have, say, small defects that aren't necessarily keeping our code from being released, but something that may need addressing at a later time. So for example, it talked about using an import method that we don't really require, it's not being used. We can mark an item here where we will add this, let's see, not needed. We can add it as a defect. And if we want to actually move this to an external tracking tool, we have the ability to export these issues externally. So for example, we have an integration with Jira. This export issue normally takes me out to my Jira integration. I need to make sure I've got that. Oh, I'm on my firewalled server. I'm not even thinking about it. I can't reach my Jira server from here. My apologies. But you do have the ability to export these items to track in external ticketing systems if you have those available. So we're just going to go ahead and leave that one. And now that we have some reviews marked in our code, we can send this back to Rework for our author. And you'll note that this puts my account, the review account, into a waiting status until any activity occurs within this review. So my script, unfortunately today, is a little bit kludgy. So I'm going to make a couple changes here. So when we make our changes and go through that update process, I'm just going to append these files back to my current review rather than creating a new one. I appreciate your patience. The Collaborator does offer complete customization over your flows, and we're going to touch a little bit later on checklists as well as customizing your review templates. Now, with my changes, I can come in and we can comment out those items we don't need. We can put in our updates. There was an issue with the class. I think it needs to be abstract to take care of one of our errors. And we had a couple of R's missing from our variable names. And finally, our static linting tool did not like the fact that we defined these variables all in the same line for readability. So we can clean up our code a little bit and save that. So it's basically a repeat of the same process. We can add it and recommit it. And we'll see that our Jenkins job is rerunning. And what we'll see is the code changes we've made, as well as the new output from the analysis tools, will get appended to our current review.
You know, Mel, while that's running and things are getting set up, I'll just walk people maybe through a little bit about what we do today, which is, as Mel mentioned, we have an integration with Jira, and we're in the middle of building an additional plugin for Jira as well. So that'll be coming out, I'm hoping early Q1. But this idea is that you can, of course, link items from inside a Collaborator here back to Jira. Also, if you're using tools like GitLab, GitHub, Bitbucket, we're also going to be releasing Azure DevOps integration here in the next probably week or so. And those links automatically show up in your remote system link section as well. So you have this bidirectional linking between your pull requests, whatever that tool might be, Collaborator here. If you've got Jira integrations, you're going to see that stuff here. And then one of the things that we do is as Collaborator, a review starts, so a pull request is generated, and we use GitHub. So a pull request is generated, it automatically kicks off a Collaborator review. We run Jenkins, and we run our tools with Jenkins, right? Just kind of like what Mel is doing here. But then we also, with that pull request, we create that build through Jenkins, and then we take that build and we host it on Amazon as a test build. And then we link that test build inside a Collaborator here as well. So that way, when the person who's going to do the code review comes in to look at the review, they can review the source code, but they can also go and play with that change live inside of that Amazon instance that's running. We call it an experimental instance. So they can have a link right here. They just click on the link. It opens up the experimental instance. They can have the code review. They can see it working live. They can see the code review. QA also now has that link to play with it and can test against it, etc. So we take all of that stuff and bring it together inside a Collaborator as well. So just kind of sharing some things about what we're doing.
Great, thanks, Justin. And you mentioned Azure DevOps. It looks like we're going to have a little bit of time left over at the end of our session today. I'd be happy to spin that up and show you exactly how that integration that Justin mentioned works, where you create a pull request from within your remote repository. It generates the Collaborator review and has bidirectional system linking between the two. We'll definitely touch on that at the end of today's session as kind of a bonus.
Cool.
So as we've made the updates and my script has run, we will now see I'm back in my author account, and I do have new versions of all of these files uploaded with hopefully no errors. So we'll see highlighted in yellow what's been changed. If we take a look at our static outputs, okay, I've taken care of all of those particular files. And one of the benefits Collaborator gives you is you can also compare versions. So this is the latest upload, but if I want to compare it to my first upload, I can look at these in the differences viewer just like I do a code file. That's just to make sure that we've addressed all the issues that we were looking at. And my compile file is going to be a little bit different. It actually comes up empty because my compile was successful and it did not generate an output file. So we know that our compile actually worked. So we can go ahead and send this off to inspection because as an author, I cannot fix my own bugs. So we'll send this off to inspection and then switch back to our inspector account. And we'll now see that the new files have been added here as well. So I can come in and look at my files. Let's see, I've got a new version uploaded, my build completed by looking at my compile file. I can see that my build's completed. I can see that my static output has all been taken care of. So if I go back into my file, I can come in and mark off my bugs as fixed. So I can mark this as fixed. And one of the nice things about it with Collaborator, it maintains all of this data in the database. So if you're part of one of those industries that require regulation and historical data on your reviews and your code processes, Collaborator is a great fit for you in that type of environment. We can go ahead and mark these as fixed as well. And now with all of our bugs marked as fixed, we can go ahead and send our review to a completed status. And that's the review process using the system automation that I've built out today.
Yeah, Mel, I think what's interesting like I said, we're using GitHub internally, but our integration with GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, Azure DevOps, which is just around the corner, they're all very, very similar in this idea of, you can create pull requests, they're automatically going to kick off Collaborator reviews. And then once these reviews are completed, then you could go ahead and merge those items automatically if that's something that you want to do. So basically it builds a gate into your process. Now, Mel also just demonstrated this with native Git, but we support 11 version control tools in total. So if you've got some teams, and we see this a lot with our customers, where you've got a couple of teams that are using Subversion, maybe a couple that are using native Git, some people that are thinking about moving to GitHub or GitLab, and so you can use Collaborator and integrate with all of those different tools as part of your workflow.
Right, and we'll demonstrate that at least with Azure DevOps here in just a moment. I just wanted to touch on a couple of other things for any executives that may be listening. If you're interested in your code metrics, you can get a detailed report of a specific review, which gives you your defect information, how much time your coders are spending on reviews. You can look at inspection rates and defects per lines of code, comments that were added. So you have this great view within your organization to see how metrics or how coding and review is being handled. And if you want to look beyond just one particular review, we have the ability to customize what we're looking at for reviews. We can select a few items, and this is just based on some of the reviews that I have on my local server. We can filter based on almost any item that you want to look for, from participants to counts to times, specific categories if you're looking at defects. And we can go ahead and run a quick report that generates based on all of the items that we've asked for. These reports can be downloaded in Excel formats or CSVs. You can even create links to commonly run reports. So if you're an administrator and you want to know how your team is doing and you want to run a report every Monday, you can generate a link that will take you directly to that report and allow you to just bookmark that and come in Monday morning, one click, and get your reports from the Collaborator server. We did touch a little bit on what you can do with Collaborator, and I'll just bring up one of my other demos here to show you a little bit of what can be done as far as your workflow. So in this particular case, I've actually assigned a different template beyond the basic template that has some additional requirements. It still has the same basic requirements for author and reviewer, but Collaborator includes up to 4 roles that you can assign to any review, and those roles are completely customizable. You can even set the number of contributors from each type of role that are required on a review. You can set whether or not those individuals are required to actually sign off on a review before it can be completed. So you do have complete customization of what Collaborator does for your workflow. All right, and since we have touched on that, I'll throw my last polling question up there. Would you like to find out more about Collaborator? And while that's going on, let's make sure, are there any final questions in the Q&A for us, Justin?
No, I think what the Azure DevOps piece is interesting to some folks, so we'll have you pull that up and walk through it. And again, we're going to go through Azure DevOps, but that integration is going to be very similar to the GitLab, GitHub, and Bitbucket integrations, which we already offer today. Those are available right now. The Azure DevOps is just around the corner.
Right. So let me close these out since we're no longer using those, and I will. Let's see. Well, my final slide. Are there any questions?
There you go.
So let's get back into what the Azure DevOps looks like. So I'm just going to log into my Azure DevOps account. And we'll go through basically the same type of process, except this time we're going to start from Azure, which this is hosted out on Microsoft's site. I'm coming into my project. I'm going to select a repo and just make a quick edit on a file. We'll call this change 1. Now within Azure, I just make a commit, and I'm currently working out of my master branch, which I know is kind of taboo. So I will create a test branch for this particular piece of code. Now I could do a commit, but that won't let me do anything with the file until I actually create a pull request within Azure. So we'll go ahead and select that option. We can add some additional information if we want to with the description, but I'm going to go ahead and just create my pull request. And this is from the test branch into the master branch. And what we should see here in just a moment, because this account is tied into my Collaborator server, we'll actually see that Collaborator has responded with a review for this pull request, that it has been created. And as Justin mentioned earlier, we have a link directly to this review. Now, we'll go to Collaborator in just a moment, but I wanted to touch on a point made earlier about process flow. We'll see here that I have a requirement that my review is completed before I move on. Now, Collaborator is what gates this. I cannot actually come in here and mark my review as complete because I'm still, pardon me, my pull request. I cannot merge because my review is still in process. It won't even let me select the complete merge button because Collaborator is requiring this checkpoint. So with that, we can go directly into my review. And it's going to log me in. And so this takes me directly to my review. And again, I have review subscriptions set up on this server for this particular account. And we'll see that as the author, I've actually got it sent directly to inspection in this case. So I have the link, as Justin mentioned, directly back to Azure, so I can go back to my code to work on it if I need to. But the whole process has been kicked off just by making the pull request within Azure.
Yeah, and then if this were to get completed, right, then at that point, then you can merge that request, right? That review would be complete on Azure, and then you could move on.
Certainly, I can demonstrate that in just a moment.
Now, like I said, we had a couple people that had shown some interest in Azure DevOps stuff, so hopefully this kind of gets you thinking about what it is that we're doing here, and then if you want to see something specific, or you have, want a full demo or whatever, we'd be happy to set that up for you. Now, one of the things I'll just talk about, a lot of people will ask me, well, why Collaborator on top of, let's say, Azure or GitLab or GitHub or whatever it might be? And what we find is many of our customers are maybe using some legacy SCMs today. So let's just say Subversion or ClearCase or whatever it might be. They're moving to Git, maybe they're moving and adding one of those tools, but they want one central tool that they can use that is going to allow them to continue to use all of those different SCMs. Collaborator can do that. You can use the same or similar processes depending upon what you want to do across those different tools. And then the other side of it is that what we find with tools like Azure or GitLab is you do have this ability to go in and add comments and perform kind of a lightweight review. But for many organizations, that lightweight review is not enough for them. And so they like to be able to capture additional information. So whether that's information through custom fields, whether that's, as Mel has been illustrating today, having that transparency, so seeing everything in one central location that they can go and reference and have links back to, ensuring that they have the appropriate participants in a review as well as the right number of people. So sometimes it's, hey, we got to have a security person and we got to have 3 reviewers and a moderator. Collaborator can help drive that process for you. Again, whether you're using some legacy SCMs or whether you're moving towards Git and some of the repository management solutions. And then on top of all of that, Collaborator also supports document review. So if you wanted to review your requirements, test cases, test plans, user stories, whatever it might be, you could do that as well. So again, it's a question that I get asked often, and so I just thought I'd take a moment to explain why you might be looking at Collaborator in addition to those other tools.
Yeah, excellent points. So back on Azure, I've completed this review. If we go back to that pull request, we can follow the link. What we'll see that my review has been completed. We can see who authored it. We can even see the reviewer that signed off on it. And now that the review is complete, we've met our requirement for that particular item, and we can actually make a merge request if we want to. So if we go back to our commits, pull requests, look at our pull request, and whoops, it didn't take me back where I wanted to go. I think I'm not in my main account because I'm logged in as my reviewer. It's just letting me look at it. Yeah, I need to be logged in as my main account. So let's go back to that sign in. And we'll see that I'll be able to close my review. So that's an important point to make, that if you have reviewers following those links and you want to make sure that they can't make any changes within your repositories, they can go have a look, but can't make any change. So now you can see that my review is completed. I can go ahead and set this up and complete my merge into my branch. And that takes care of it. Now, as Justin mentioned earlier, with the integrations into Collaborator, we can set up how this behaves when we close out a review. So within our remote systems integrations and our repository hosting services. The only one I have set up here is the Collaborator to Azure that we just looked at, but we do have the ability to control how this behaves. So in this particular case, I have my status check. This is what prevented me from making a merge on a pull request without completing the review. So if I had set this to false, I could have made merges in Azure without the Collaborator review completion. So setting this to true enables your workflow and makes sure that that quality gate is in place. But we also have the ability to have Collaborator tell Azure what to do when the review is completed. So we have a couple options where you can complete your pull requests automatically. You can complete and delete. So you do have options within Collaborator to control what your remote repositories do upon the completion of a review. Do we have any further questions about what we've talked about today?
I don't see anything else, Mel. I think everything's been covered. Obviously, if you've got any additional questions, you can feel free to add them now real quick. Let us know, raise your hand, and we'll be happy to get with you individually.
And if there are any needs beyond Collaborator for SmartBear products, smartbear.com will take you down any path you need to go for your solution needs.
Great. Well, thanks, everybody. Really appreciate your time today, and just grateful for the opportunity to walk you through Collaborator and talk a little bit more about transparency within that SDLC. Mel, thanks for walking us through everything. And with that, we'll go ahead and sign off.
Thank you, everyone.